Before Christianity was this global religion, it was basically a fragile startup. And like any startup, it almost didn't make it. Today, we're going to dig into the book of Acts and look at two huge existential crises that nearly tore the early church apart from the inside out. We'll also see how they solved them and why those solutions still matter today. So, when you think about the very first Christians, what comes to mind? Probably this, right? This idyllic picture of a perfectly united community, everyone holding hands, totally in sync. It's a really nice thought, but yeah, that's not quite how it went down. The reality was a lot messier. The book of Acts itself talks about no small dissension and debate. It was a movement that was seriously wrestling with some deep, painful conflicts. All right, so let's get into that first crisis. And this wasn't just some small disagreement over details. No, this was a full-blown identity crisis that honestly threatened to split the entire movement in two before it ever really got off the ground. The whole thing really blew up in a city called Antioch. A group of guys show up from Judea, and they lay down the law for all the new non-Jewish believers, the Gentiles. They basically said, hey, it's great you believe in Jesus, but if you actually want to be saved, you have to become Jewish first. And that started with circumcision. So here are the two sides, right? You've got one faction saying, look, salvation is faith plus the law. It's a two-part deal. But on the other side, you've got Paul and Barnabas saying, no, 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 faith in Jesus is enough. That's it for everyone. The stakes here are massive. This is a deal breaker. So they all head to Jerusalem to settle this thing. And this leads to this huge, pivotal moment we now call the Jerusalem Council. All the top leaders, the apostles, the elders, they all get together to figure this out once and for all. And what they decide here is going to shape everything. So after a ton of debate, the Apostle Peter gets up and he just drops this bombshell of a question. He calls the law a yoke. This heavy wooden beam you put on an ox, it's a burden. And he says, even we couldn't handle this burden. Our ancestors couldn't handle it. So why on earth would we try to force it onto them? And then Peter does something incredible. He completely flips the logic of the entire debate. The whole argument started with, do Gentiles need to become like us Jews to be saved? And Peter flips it and says, no, you're missing the point. We get saved the exact same way they do, through grace. He just leveled the playing field entirely. It's a total game changer. And that was the final verdict from the council. It was this radical, mind-blowing declaration that God doesn't make distinctions. It doesn't matter what your background or your ethnicity is. This meant that church wasn't going to be some small sect of Judaism. It was going to be a global faith, open to anyone, anywhere, simply through faith. Okay, so problem number one, the identity crisis, is solved. But years go by and a second, maybe even more dangerous threat starts to bubble up. This one wasn't about who could get in the church, it was about who was leading it from the inside. So the scene shifts. We're with the Apostle Paul now, and he's having this really emotional goodbye with the leaders of the church in Ephesus. He spent years with them, mentoring them, building this community. And then he tells them, I'm leaving, and you're never going to see me again. And in the middle of this heartbreaking farewell, he gives them a terrifying warning. Paul doesn't mince words. He uses this absolutely chilling metaphor, fierce wolves. He's warning them that dangerous false teachers are on their way, and their goal isn't just to argue or disagree. Their goal is to destroy the community, to not spare the flock. So you hear that, and you're probably thinking, okay, the threat's got to be from the outside, right? Some rival religion, maybe some hostile philosophy trying to infiltrate the group. That's the logical assumption. But what Paul says next is what is so deeply shocking. He says the greatest danger, the wolves, they aren't going to come from outside. They're going to rise up from right there in the room, from their own leadership team, people they know and trust, who will start twisting the truth to build their own little following. But here's the thing. Paul doesn't just drop this terrifying warning and walk away. That's not his style. He leaves them with a clear, practical blueprint for how to protect themselves, how to guard the church long after he's gone. And to get them to understand just how high the stakes are, he reminds them of this core idea of redemption. He says God obtained the church. He purchased it with his own blood. Think about that. This isn't just some club or organization. It's a treasure bought at the highest possible price. And that's exactly why it has to be protected so fiercely. So here's Paul's 4-part plan. First, be vigilant. You got to watch out for yourselves and for everyone in your care. Second, teach the whole truth, not just the popular or easy parts. Third, serve humbly. He basically says, look at me, I worked with my own hands to support myself and help the weak. Do that. And fourth, guard the doctrine. Don't be afraid to stand up to those who twist the truth. It's all about creating leaders who are protectors, not predators. And Paul wraps up this entire leadership philosophy by sharing a quote from Jesus that we actually don't find anywhere else in the Gospels. It's this beautiful, simple principle that sums it all up. It is more blessed to give than to receive. That's the heart of a true leader. So when you pull it all together, you see the survival of the early church wasn't just a happy accident. It wasn't a given. It happened because they faced two fundamental make-or-break problems head-on. Who are we, and who leads us? And they came up with two brilliant solutions that became the pillars holding the whole thing up. First, an identity built on radical grace that could welcome anyone. And second, a leadership model built on humble protection and selfless service. Those two ideas allowed this fragile movement not just to survive, but to eventually change the world. Which kind of leaves us with a big question, doesn't it? A welcoming, inclusive identity and a protective, selfless leadership. Those two things were absolutely essential 2,000 years ago. And it really makes you wonder, what happens to any community, any organization, any movement today when one of those pillars starts to crack?